This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's up, Real MVPs, Ricky Widmer here, along with the one, the only, Brandon Swanson.
Hey.
And we are back for another edition of the Primetime Podcast right here on Most Valuable Podcast, your one-stop shop for everything college football and college basketball. And Brandon, before we get into everything, what a few games we had this past weekend. Tennessee, Purdue was insane. Duke, Michigan State. There were people that were saying that we got robbed of a great national championship between those two teams because they met in the Elite Eight. And then you got Auburn, who their star player goes down. Then they rally behind the emotion of losing him to beat Kentucky. A great weekend here for the tournament, Sweet 16 Elite Eight.
Well, this is what we're going to get all the time, and it has not disappointed. This has been another great March Madness, and it's not over yet. There's been so much emotion. There's been so many storylines. I think one of the best is Auburn with Chuma Okeke going down in the game against, who was it that they were playing? North Carolina. He goes down. His team rallies. They didn't need to do much rallying because North Carolina fell asleep on him. Mm-hmm. But I just loved their intensity that they played with against Kentucky. They never quit in that game. Kentucky proved to be a very, very good team, as they always are. John Calipari coached team, and now they're for life. I think that Auburn has already overcome so many great things, beating number one North Carolina in their region, losing their number one player, beating number two Kentucky. And now you're going up against Virginia, a team that a lot of people would say should not be there because the Purdue Boilermakers had every opportunity to close it. I'm just saying, the Purdue Boilermakers specifically in that game had every opportunity to close it out. They were not able to close the window on them. You look at the game against Oregon. Oregon wasn't able to close the door on Virginia. But Virginia, another nice storyline from last year, going out against the number 16 team that had never happened ever, happens to Virginia. They're back in the Final Four. Then you look at Texas Tech. They're in the Final Four. Michigan State in the Final Four for the first time since, 2014? Or something like that?
2014, 2015, I think.
Or maybe it was 2016. I can't remember. It was just a couple of years ago, but 2015 I think may have been when they lost to Middle Tennessee. But this is really fun. This is really exciting. It's been a great ride. We've seen just some awesome basketball, and like I said, we are not done yet.
Yeah, Virginia, to me, I'll be honest, I know people are going to say, well, they won the game, that's all that matters. You're right. But should have lost to Oregon and then should have lost to Purdue. Got a little bit lucky in those games, but I can't wait for the Final Four this Saturday, National Championship next Monday. That's why we're going to be coming at you a little bit later in the week next week because of that championship game. We won't be recording on Monday. We'll be recording on Wednesday of that week. But Brandon, before we get into what we're going to get into, make sure to check out patreon.com/Most Valuable Podcast. That's how you help support us. We've got new tiers on the way. They should be up by the time you're looking at this. Go over to patreon.com/Most Valuable Podcast. Redid our goals, redid our rewards to give you everything that you want for supporting us. Helping you help us, we're going to give back to you and give you something for helping us and making sure that we can give you everything that we want to each and every day. But Brandon, jam-packed show. It's just the versus show. We're going to have some showdowns. We're going to take a look at Jarrett Culver versus Cam Reddish. One prospect really on the rise. The other one kind of sliding down draft boards. We're going to take a look at those two guys today. Then we're going to move over into the world of football and kind of predict where the top 5 quarterbacks, Kyler Murray, Dwayne Haskins, Drew Lock, Daniel Jones, and Will Grier, which teams they will be landing to, and kind of some NFL draft discussion. Then we're going to come back into the college basketball sphere to discuss 2 second-round guards, and Cassius Winston and Carson Edwards, and kind of looking at them. Cassius Winston obviously going to the Final Four. Carson Edwards is not. Jarrett Culver also going to the Final Four. Cam Reddish is not. So, Brandon, let's start with that first one, though. Cam Reddish, Jarrett Culver. Jarrett Culver is, if you look at draft boards, he is just skyrocketing since his play in March. And, of course, everyone's on the national stage now, so, of course, more eyes are going to be on you. But Culver is moving up draft boards. You've got Cam Reddish moving down draft boards. I want to ask you, let's start with Jarrett Culver because he's the riser. What have you seen this year and from Culver in March that makes you either like or not like him, depending on where you are with JC?
Well, I think that when you look at the way that he has played in the tournament, you look a little bit at... I look, first of all, how he's been shooting from the floor. So in his first game against Northern Kentucky, almost 60% from the field. That's pretty good. But then it goes down against Buffalo to 35%, shoots back up against Michigan to 47%, and then way down against Gonzaga to 26%. So I think that one of the things when he's at the next level, it's going to be how good is his mid-range jumper? How good is he, on the floor inside of three? Because when you look at his threes, again, in those 4 games, 3 out of 5, 1 out of 4, 0 out of 5, and 2 out of 8. So he hasn't established himself yet as a great three-point shooter. How is he going to be as a mid-range jump shooter? That's, I think, where a lot of people are going to wonder about him. He's a fantastic ball handler. I think he's great as a ball handler, someone who can certainly move with the basketball up and down the floor and can, shake and bake really well. But then if he gets a good shake and bake, is he going to be able to knock down and drain that clutch shot? That's going to be, I think, a question for me in what certainly a lot of teams will look at next level NBA. Also, I think he's a pretty darn good defender. I wouldn't say probably the elite defender at the next level, but he's certainly a guy who's been known for his defense as well. But my main concern on that, Ricky, is he's got to get more consistent in terms of his mid-range jump shot.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, the thing that I want to go off of the defense because you mentioned that's the thing that I think kind of separates these two in a sense, because both of these, it's funny to me that what we thought Cam Reddish would be, Jarrett Culver is.
Yeah.
Where Cam Reddish, we thought he would be a guy that, you know what? He's going to he can play off ball. He's going to shoot the three. He can drive to the basket, and he can play defense, which Cam Reddish can do, but we'll get into him in a little bit because he's kind of an enigma, I would say, for this draft class. But Jarrett Culver, watching his film, he's a guy that has the shooting stroke. I mean, the 70% from the line, I would like that to go up a little bit. He's a guy that averages about 5-6 foul shots a game, only makes about 3 to 4 of those. So you'd want that to go up. But the thing is, he also rebounds the ball very well. He averages about 6 of those a game. And like I said, I know Dave and I kind of had this discussion on the fast break. I feel like Jarrett Culver's a guy that can play off ball well for a team. He's not going to be a guy that, hey, I got to have the ball in my hands. Can he have the ball in his hands? Absolutely. But he's a guy, he can play off of it in pick and roll. Hey, I'm going to set a pick. All right, now slide to the basket. You hit him driving. He can finish at the hoop. He can also shoot from the outside. And he has that defensive skill. Like you said, is he an elite defender? I wouldn't say elite. I would say a pretty damn good defender at the college level right now. And I mean, you look at the stats between them, and this is, of course, per 36 stats that I'm looking at, but you look at points per game, Culver's got more, 21 to 16. Rebounds per game, 7 to 4.5. Culver has more assists than Cam Reddish. Reddish has technically more blocks and steals, and Culver has less turnovers and fouls. But the thing to me is the true shooting, where Culver has a better true shooting percentage. He has a better efficient field goal percentage, and he has a better free throw rate than Cam Reddish. What do you think it is with Cam Reddish that... Because to me, I almost feel like we're in the Nasir Little boat with Cam Reddish. Not that he's going to be a bust at the next level, but I often wonder with Cam Reddish, if you were on a different team and not with Zion and RJ, would it be different? Because Culver does not have to play with RJ and Zion. Cam Reddish does.
Ricky, in our first big board that we did, I think you and I, rightfully so at the time,
dookies.
it was 1, 2, 3. And at the time, we joked, but I think we were serious of, come the end of the year, we're probably going to be doing this same thing for 1, 2, 3. It's just a matter of who's going to be 2, who's going to be 3. And now it's gotten to the point where John Morant put himself into that category. Jarrett Culver has tried to put himself into that category. I tried to lean on Brandon Clark to maybe put himself into that category as well. But I asked the same question as you just did. Would Cam Reddish be any different if he was on a team not labeled the Duke Blue Devils? And my thought would be, well, yeah, he would have to be. Cam's been able to, and I've said it a number of times this year, where he's just disappeared. He's disappeared. He's gone off into the corner, hasn't been called upon. And for Duke, to Cam's displeasure, I think, and what's worked against him is that's been just fine, because they've still won games without him. They've still won games with him not playing at the top of his games. They've still won games with R.J. Barrett not playing at the top of his games, because they have a guy called Zion Williamson. Well, they did. It's over now. But I think that Cam Reddish is still going to be a good player at the next level. You know, he's a strong forward type. He can knock down shots from distance. He has shown that he can do that when he's given the opportunity. He can defend both big and small. That's going to be something that's going to be working for him. He can play the 3. He can play the 4. You know, he's not locked into having to do one of those things. I guess I also look at a guy who is at 6'8" with a 7'1" wingspan. There's a lot of athletic ability there. I mean, he is a true athlete. He can space the floor. But for me, it's what are we, in a sense, you're asking, what are we going to see out of the real Cam Reddish at the next level? What are we going to see out of the real Cam Reddish where, yes, there's other players on your team, but guess what? Now you're being put into a different situation where maybe you are being called upon to be more of the man. Are you able to shoulder that load? And then if you do, what's it going to look like? Because we saw what it looked like with Cam Reddish as the number 3, the clear number 3, and it was okay. And a lot of people would probably say it was good for the number 3. Does that excite you for him to be possibly a number 1 or a number 2? Or does it make you nervous to have him be a number 1, number 2, even with all of his athletic ability, even with all the skills and the positions that he can play? What are you more looking for and leaning towards, Ricky? Are you leaning towards more of, I'm nervous because I'm not sure, or I'm excited because I think he could?
I think the thing with Cam Reddish is that maybe, and this is me just throwing the question out there, because maybe at the beginning of the year, we expected Zion, RJ, and Cam to be finished products at the end of first year. And then we saw it. Like, Zion played a game. Well, let's be honest. Zion played an exhibition game, and everyone's like, he could be in the NBA right now. Like, he is, to me, and I've said it before on the Fast Break, I will say it here. I have been on record numerous times saying Zion Williamson will be the next best player in the NBA after LeBron James is long gone. Like, that to me is Zion Williamson. His track is becoming the next number 1 player in the NBA. That's what I see for him. Like, he played an exhibition game where you're like, oh, he could be in the NBA. RJ Barrett throughout the entire year, and now at the end, we see and he go, okay, he can be in the NBA. But we look at Cam Reddish, and I bring up Nasir Little because we've talked about this way with Nasir all year, and I feel like Nasir is on a more dramatic note than Cam Reddish because of how awful he's been all year, unless they play Iona. But that's like a point that Sean makes. Like, oh, when Nasir Little plays weaker opponents, he plays well. When he plays tough opponents, he plays like poo-poo. But with Cam Reddish, I feel like maybe the answer is he's not a finished product yet. Like, is it okay? And the answer to me is yes, because it's a draft and it's 1 year of college. Like, you're not expecting every single player isn't going to be, yes, I am ready to contribute 100% to an NBA team my first year. Not everyone's going to be LeBron James. They can step in as an 18-year-old kid and fend for themselves in the NBA. And I just feel like maybe Cam Reddish is more of a project or more of a player that, hey, we're going to draft you because we see what the ceiling is for Cam Reddish, and we feel like we can get the most out of him. However, the biggest question, I think this is why people are so unsure about Cam Reddish. I think it was in this article that I'm reading from NBC Sports. The question is, where's his floor? Like, where's the starting point for Cam Reddish? Like most prospects, okay, this is what I'm getting at his very least. Like, this is what I know he'll be at the very least. The potential, this is what, like, the most he could grow into. But because I think we're unsure about where that floor is, that's why we're so unsure about him in the top 3 or even the top 5 of the NBA draft.
Well, do you think we've seen his floor? Do you think we saw it this year at Duke? I mean,
I would like to say no.
We didn't see his ceiling.
Yeah, no,
we
for
didn't,
sure.
We didn't see his ceiling. We know that. I guess also too is any team that takes him, and I'm certainly not trying to sound doom or gloom at all, and this probably won't come off as that, but it's more of he's not a safe pick. Like whoever picks Zion for the sake of Chicago, just the Bulls should just be able to do it.
I tweeted today, Mike 2K, one of our loyal listeners was like, someone tweeted out, someone who does a Bulls podcast was like, did the first sim of April and the Bulls were the number 1 pick? I'm telling you, if the Bulls get the first pick May 8th or May 14th, I'm going on NBAshop.com.
Yes,
I'm dropping money on a custom Zion jersey, and then I'm going to be mad because the Bulls will probably trade the pick to piss me off. I'll waste all that money on a custom Zion Williamson number 1 Bulls jersey, which people might get mad at because number 1 is Derrick Rose's number, but I'm still going to do it because Zion was 1 in college, and he's going to be number 1 in my heart now. But I will, May 14th, buy that jersey if we get the number 1 pick, but that's an aside note. Go ahead.
With Cam Reddish, I love your idea, and you've been saying that for a while, so I know you're not kidding. With Cam Reddish, though, it's no safe. He's not a safe pick.
No.
He's not a safe pick. Zion Williamson is a safe pick. RJ Barrett is a pretty safe pick that you're going to get plenty of scoring. He's going to come with everything that we saw him do at Duke plus. With Cam Reddish, it's there. You talked about it, Ricky. There's things there to like, and I mentioned some too, but there is more question marks surrounding what more can he do and when will we see it. That's the biggest thing with Cam Reddish is that. That's why I go back to your number 1 question is if he was not with the Duke Blue Devils. I think, of course, Ja Morant's a better player, but if he was the player on Murray State, would people be talking more about and Ja Morant was over on Duke, then are we less about Ja Morant, even though he's still a great player, and more on, Cam Reddish, because look he's done so much for his team because he's the only one. I mean, clearly, when Murray State played, Florida State? They just got manhandled in the tournament. Ja Morant still put up tons of stats and was phenomenal from 3. You could just tell an outstanding ball handler, had it together, was just a pretty good talent. But no one else on Murray State did anything. Would that have been what we talked about with Cam Reddish if he was the one on Murray State? Or would he just be, he's pretty good? What would have been the significance of him being the guy on another college team, and how would that have helped him? Or would that have possibly hurt him because we would have seen, okay, maybe he's He's a good player, but maybe he's going to come after number 10 in the draft. I know I'm maybe being crazy, but, could it have been changed really positively or possibly more negatively?
Well, I'll tell you this. I'm looking at the teams that offered him, and he had 17 offers coming out. Duke was the one he was going to go to. Duke was the only school he visited.
When Duke offers you for basketball, you're pretty much going.
But here were the 17 offers for Cam Reddish. Duke, Alabama, Arizona, Auburn, UConn, Kansas, Kentucky, Maryland, Miami, Penn State, Pittsburgh, Seton Hall, Syracuse, UCLA, USC, Villanova, Virginia, Harvard, and UNC. Look at a team like Villanova. What if he was... Because let's be honest, if he went to Villanova, yes, they had their kind of senior guys there. He would have been the guy for Villanova. Like, yeah, Pascal is good. But
and Booth. Booth was another guy.
But they're not, like, if Cam Reddish is coming to town, Cam Reddish is the guy Villanova's excited for. Like, what would he have done in Villanova? Good team, well-coached team, but in an easier conference in the Big East, and being the number one on that team. Like, I still go back, and my big thing is whenever we have the discussion on the Fast Break about Cam Reddish, Sean's a guy where Sean is completely negative about Cam Reddish, and rightfully so. Like, I mean, Cam Reddish has done nothing this year besides a shot against Florida State when Zion left the game with an injury that has given you any, like, if you're a Cam supporter, he has given you no ammo this year except for maybe that shot. And to me, I wonder, and I know people say it's a crutch or, oh, it's an excuse. I wonder if playing next to RJ or on the same team with Zion, too many mouths to feed. Where, I mean, maybe it's like Nasir Little in a sense. I'm going to bring that into it again, where people are like, oh, look at his high school tape. But then his high school usage, UNC used him in a completely different situation. I wonder if Cam Reddish would have been the same way, and we're never going to get that answer. However, the thing we got with Jarrett Culver to bring him back into this discussion was he was a guy last year who him and Zaire Smith were paired up. Zaire went to the NBA, Jarrett Culver stayed, and Jarrett Culver is not a freshman. He's a guy that's now been in college for 2 years. Is that another kind of little reason of maybe why Jarrett Culver, because last year, like even Dave said, Dave's like, if Jarrett Culver would have came out, I wouldn't have even known who he was, and he wouldn't have been high on my draft boards. But he stays. He has a really good year this year, and now he's top 5, maybe now even rising into top 3 discussion. Like, we had a discussion on the Fast Break weeks ago about who should be number 2, Ja or RJ. And I know there's still people that think RJ should be 2, but to me it's pretty clear cut. Zion's 1 and Ja is 2 when you're talking big board.
I agree with you.
Now, I would say Jarrett Culver is kind of playing himself into the discussion of, like, at first you're asking, is it RJ or Ja at 2? Now you can ask, is it RJ or Jarrett at 3 if you're putting together a big board?
Well, I think, too, though, is that, I mean, and again, I know this is a smaller sample size, but when you look at this tournament and you look at what Texas Tech just did to Michigan,
well, and that's the thing.
Culver's,
how much stock do you put in a couple games in March?
I'm putting a decent amount of stock into it because the big time players are going to show up and play in the big time moments.
Yeah.
And Jarrett Culver is part of that reason that Texas Tech defense was so dominant against Michigan, a team that I think a lot of people thought was going to roll right into the Final Four, at least to the Final Four again, this year. And he was part of that defense. Pair that with his scoring, pair that with his ball handling ability, pair that with, just the fact that he's a pretty darn good talent. That's why he's moving up draft boards, is because while he's not going to be shooting lights out, and be this 30 points per game type of guy, he brings a little bit in every single area. And I think that's why he's been slowly rising. Whereas a guy like Cam Reddish, who a lot of people I think expected and had bigger expectations for him is slowly falling.
Because he's a part of the Duke 3.
That's where we may not know until he gets to we aren't going to know until he gets to the next level what Cam Reddish, this is the question. We're not going to, it's not a question, it's more of a statement.
Yeah.
We're not going to know who Cam Reddish is until he gets to the next level. We're not going to know the real Cam Reddish until the next level, because what we saw, I would like to believe that's not the real Cam Reddish. That's not the best that you're going to get from him.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the thing I kind of think too, and this is going back to Cam, and I'm not saying this will happen to Cam. I'm not even saying I wish this happens to Cam, but like you look at it, and I'm going to reference back to the last time in my life I saw a collection of players come together and kind of take college basketball by storm was when I was like, and of course for me it was looking back on it because I was like 2 and 3 when it happened, but like even when I was 5 or 6, it's hard not to know who the Fab Five are, especially when you get into college basketball and you start looking at Chris Webber and Jalen Rose in the NBA as you're watching that as a young kid. But like that's the last time I felt like a collection of just players were like, hey, we're going to go to this one school and we're going to dominate. RJ, Zion, and Cam are in that same discussion. But if you look at it, out of all the Fab Five, Chris Webber, he had a pretty long NBA career, drafted in 93, played all the way until 2008. Then you have Jalen Rose, drafted in 94, played all the way until 2007. Juwan Howard, drafted in 94, played actually all the way until 2013, and is now an assistant coach in the league. But then you have like the other guys on that team, which it was Jimmy King was one, drafted in 95. By 97, he was down in the D League. Then you look at the other one, Ray Jackson, he went undrafted and didn't even play in the NBA. So it's like, I'm not saying Cam Reddish is going to be like Ray Jackson where he didn't play. I'm not even saying Cam Reddish is going to be like Jimmy King where, hey, he gets drafted and then kind of slides out because Jimmy King was a second-round pick. No way Cam Reddish is going to be a second-round pick because he's going, like Cam Reddish to me is either going to be a top 5 pick or just outside the top 5 when we get to the June's draft. I almost said April, but I'm on NBA kind of scheduling there, or NFL scheduling there. I don't. Cam to me, the one word, if you said, Ricky, describe Cam Reddish in one word, the word I would use is enigma.
Yeah.
Because it's the biggest question that nobody seems to have an answer to. And there's some people out there that if you're a like Cam Reddish supporter, you're going to say he's going to be the biggest steal in the draft because that's what you feel. But then there's going to be the other side of it, which Sean Anderson is on, where kind of like on the other side, where if you take this guy too high, we might be looking at him as not like a bust to where he's out of the league, but like looking back where it's like, man, maybe Cam wasn't worth that top 3 pick. Maybe we should have taken someone else in that draft. And I'm going to go back to the question of the biggest reason why is I don't think we can for sure pinpoint where his floor is because of the struggles that he's had this year at Duke.
What do you mean, floor, or do you mean ceiling?
Floor. Because I think everyone knows like the ceiling of what he can be, what we want him to be. It's just we don't know what we're going to get. Like
we've seen some bad
level.
games from him. I'm hoping that's the floor.
No. And that's it. By floor, I don't mean what he steps into the league as. What I mean by floor is at the very least progression-wise. Okay, this is what he's going to be. This is what he's going to develop into at the very least. That's what I mean by floor. Whereas ceiling is he reaches his full potential and he gets all the way to the top of his growth.
I know what they mean.
Yeah.
I just was checking to see if you were using it correctly.
I also wanted to clarify for them too, where we don't know the least of like his growth. We don't know where that least is. We don't know where it is. Is it a little bit better than he is? Is it a lot better than he is right now? And I think that's why he's falling down draft boards like he is, because nobody's like, we know what he could probably be at his best, but what could he be if he hits like his least amount of growth? And that's the big question. Whereas Jarrett Culver, I think a lot of people are saying, okay, at the least he could be this for us, and it's for sure solidified, and it's not as big of a question as Cam Reddish.
One of my final question for you, Ricky, is it gets to the NBA draft. Do you think that he's potentially out of the top 5, or do you think that Cam Reddish is still a top 5 guy that's taken?
I think,
and what team do you think takes him, and why?
I think he's still a top 5 guy. Another thing we haven't talked about that isn't big, but we won't get the answer until the combine, is Dave has brought this up before. We need to see measurements, because right now, wherever you look, Jarrett Culver is listed as 6'6", which kind of puts you more in a 2-guard range. But hey, if he gets to the combine and gets slotted at 6'8", all right, now he's a 3. Then things become more interesting, because if he's grown and he's at least 6'8", or even maybe 6'7", but more that 6'8", you could then make the discussion for, all right, Jarrett Culver could now be a 3 instead of just a 2, because that would put him at the same height as Cam Reddish. I don't think Cam Reddish falls out of the top 5. And the reason why I say that is, if we look at the order right now as we are recording it, the reason why I say he doesn't fall out of the top 5, because if everything stays chalk as it is right now, Zion would go to the Knicks at 1, Ja would go to the Suns at number 2. Cleveland would take RJ Barrett, because to me, yes, they have Colin Sexton, but they need a guy that has that Mamba mentality, as we've talked about with RJ Barrett so many times. The Bulls, this is where you ask, like, this is the question we're asking right now is what the Bulls could face if everything stays chalk. Who do we go with, Cam Reddish or Jarrett Culver? I may be leaning towards Culver for the Bulls, which then means if the Hawks are at 5, I would go Cam Reddish with 5 or 6, because the Hawks have both of those right now. But yeah, I feel like if it's right now, Cam Reddish would be at least the 4th or 5th pick, and I don't think he falls out of the top 5. The only way he falls out of the top 5 in my mind is if there's a team, depending on how the lottery shakes up, if there's a team that jumps into the top 4 that maybe could go with a point guard instead. Like, I'm trying to sim it right now to see if there's a team that may happen to. Give me a couple sims, because Tankathon is being a little weird. But like, one I'll throw out there is like the Pelicans. If the Pelicans get the 4th pick, maybe they go with a Kobe White instead of a Cam Reddish.
I do love him.
But like,
he's great.
Like, that's the only question. If a team through the process likes a guy like Brandon Clark, likes a guy like Kobe White better than Cam Reddish, better than the 3 position, and wants to go with something else, that's the only way to me he falls out of the top 5. But if we're looking top 5 right now in a draft situation, Knicks go Zion, Suns go Ja, Cavs go RJ, Bulls I would lean towards Jarrett Culver, and then the Hawks I would go with Cam Reddish. Is there anything else you think we didn't mention when it comes to Jarrett Culver or Cam Reddish? I kind of feel like Jarrett Culver, because I feel like we spent a ton of time talking about Cam Reddish.
Yeah, but good, Jarrett, good guy, guy, fan of the show. I'm kidding.
Fan of the show.
I'm sure he is. But I mean, there was
Cam's the biggest enigma.
There was more to talk about with Cam Reddish, because I think that, and I think it's because he seemed to be so solidified at the beginning of the season, and throughout I think he got lost in the shuffle of the big 3, and he ended up being the 3rd out of the 3. And that's where we're at right now, with him falling a little bit, maybe not a lot, but a little bit. And I think people's energy on him has come down from what it once was. I know certainly mine was, but I thought this was the most respectable I've talked about Cam in some time.
Yeah, well, I know I'm usually on the fast break. It's Sean giving all the, it sounds like hate, the Cam Reddish way, but Sean is just very critical of Cam Reddish. I hope the best for Cam Reddish because I really like him as a player. And really, he was the one out of the three that I was kind of pulling for since the start. But you got to love Zion. But I mean, like between RJ and Cam. But this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you guys think down below in the comment section. First off, the simple no-brainer question. Whose side are you on, Culver or Reddish? And then what do you think about each? And really, when it comes to Cam, what are your thoughts with that whole Pandora's boxes? What do you think his floor is? Do you think he'll reach his ceiling? Do you think he's a top 5? Do you think he's still a top 3? Should he fall out of the top 5? Let us know what you guys think down below.